Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. All right, the progressive movement, 1900 to 1917. To be crystal clear, it says 1917 because World War I is 1914 to 1918, and we, the United States of America, say that we are going to send troops in April or May of 1917. Really, truly, most of the troops don't actually even get there for another year, but we, the United States, joined the war in 1917, which is why the progressive movement ends in 1917, because everything else takes a back seat to World War I and our involvement in it. And that's Teddy. Okay? The progressive age that would ultimately reshape the role of government in our country began as a series of grassroots movement rejecting the plutocratic, the rich people, elements of the Gilded Age. So it reshapes government because before, government was always on the right-hand side, the Gilded Age, all of those presidents, Grant, Hayes, Garfield, Arthur, Cleveland, Harrison, Cleveland, are all pro-business, same as McKinley in the beginning of the 20th century, are all pro-business people. The progressive presidents are going to come over here. Progressivism is on this side, way over here by me. That's progressive age, and it cares about helping the little people, not the great giant corporations like the 19th century Gilded Age. And it started from grassroots movements. We already talked about that. That was the Granger movement that I told you about, that my grandfather was in the Grange. That was farmers alliances. Of course, no black people were allowed in that. A lot of these places, no women, no poor people, no immigrants. So you have to know about the Grange, and then it became farmers alliances, then populism, William Jennings Bryan, his famous Cross of Gold speech because of gold versus silver and currency, and that gold benefits the rich and silver benefits the poor. So William Jennings Bryan and the populist movement. In 1896, he runs against McKinley. I think he runs for president 3 times, but it's the closest he ever came. It was in 1896, and McKinley beats him. A lot of the populist ideals, an 8-hour workday, why can't I think of it? All of the things that they would want for the populists, they all came true. A progressive tax, direct election of senators, a lot of things that the populists wanted from their platform did eventually happen through the progressives or the Democratic Party in the future. In 1900, the U.S. had 76 million people, but most of the wealth was controlled by a small minority, and the government was uninvolved or involved on the side of business. You know this, captains of industry, robber barons, wealthy, and the government supported them, right down to bringing in troops. The dominance of large corporations transformed society and the economy, promoting urbanization and economic growth. Even though I would refer to them more as robber barons rather than captains of industry, I do have to obviously admit that they have created us as the #1 largest manufacturing country in the world by like the 1890s. So in just a matter of 30 years in the Industrial Revolution, the second Industrial Revolution, that is steel, they made us strong and powerful, but it was always at the expense of the workers. Low wages, long hours, poor working conditions, death, disability, everything. And there's no social safety net. That doesn't happen until FDR and the New Deal. Today we'll be talking about Teddy Roosevelt and the Square Deal, and that's still a progressive movement. Women were excluded. They had to have their own unions. So we had a ladies' waist and dressmakers union because women were not allowed to be in the other unions. So it began in the late 1800s. You know that part. The Populist Party of the 1890s inspired the progressives. Populism equals William Jennings Bryan. It basically equals us, Shackle Island in the 1900s, in the late 1890s and 1900s. Rural, farming community, church, very dress appropriately, speak appropriately, polite, courteous, rural. They care about silver because they aren't rich. The rich people care about gold. We believe that the power of government, in other words, of the people, should be expanded as rapidly and as far as a good sense of intelligent people and the teachings of experience shall justify. To end that oppression, injustice, and poverty should eventually cease in the land. Those are all the things the progressives are trying to end over on this side. Stuff that is better for the people, populist people. Socially active, reform-minded women played a large role in the movement, and as you know, that's going to translate into the suffragists also. Suffragettes equals England, the suffragists, but they have unions and are fighting for a 40-hour work week, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Remember, mostly it was 10, 12, 14 hours a day, sometimes 6 days a week. Socialists sought a better life for workers. Socialism, socialism, socialism. Eugene V. Debs. He runs the Socialist Party he runs for president 4 times on the socialist ticket, and the 4th time he runs from jail because he was arrested during World War I for speaking out against the government during a war. I mean, this is a famous picture. You guys have seen this before. These are kids. These are just kids. What is happening? Come on. So getting rid of child labor, populist movement, progressive movement, Democrats. Progressives fought against monopolies, corruption, government inefficiency, and social injustice. In other words, everything that the Republicans and the government supported in the Gilded Age. Monopolies, trusts. Teddy Roosevelt is one of the most famous progressives, and he's going to be referred to as the trust buster, even though William Howard Taft busts more monopolies, trust equals monopolies. Taft busts more trusts in less time, but yet we still call Teddy the trust buster. Okay, so Teddy Roosevelt, the ultimate goal was to use the federal government as an agency of human welfare and reform. He reads the book, The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, and he creates the Meat Inspection Act because of all the horrible stories that he read about the meat packing industry in the upper Midwest, like Chicago and Green Bay, Cincinnati. Muckrakers. You have to know about muckrakers. You have to know about muckrakers. You have to know about muckrakers. Today we call them investigative journalists. Back then we called them muckrakers because they would stir and rake up all of the crappy bad parts about society and bring them to the fore so that everybody would know about it, about the terrible things that were happening. In the absence of government regulation, laissez-faire economics, progressive writers called muckrakers expose the evils of the Gilded Age, encourage Americans to demand reform, and force the government to eventually address these populist issues. We don't get populist politicians elected, but almost all of the populist issues are addressed and generally changed for the better. That's the progressive era. Muckrakers are investigative journalists that tell us about the horrors of the child labor, the horrors of the meatpacking industry, all the bad things. There are in the body politic, economic and social, many and grave evils, and there is urgent necessity for the sternest war upon them. There should be relentless exposure of and attack upon every evil man, whether politician or businessman, every evil practice, whether in politics, in business, or in social life. Muckrakers. The muckrake and some of the muck. So it's all the bad things that are happening. Progressive writers expose the corruption of trusts in the absence of government regulations. Teddy called these writers muckrakers, and the name stuck. Investigative journalists. Progressive writers expose the corruption of the trust, about that trust could get away with doing anything because they had the support of the government in the late 19th century and the Gilded Age. Liberty produces wealth, and wealth destroys liberty. In 1894, Henry Demarest Lloyd exposed corruption of the Standard Oil Company, their monopoly, in wealth against Commonwealth. So he is a muckraker. As the Standard Oil article in the Atlantic became the armory of every person willing to fight for industrial freedom, wealth against Commonwealth in later years became the great storehouse of information. Lloyd desired his countrymen should be informed of existing conditions, but not that he himself should gain fame or rewards as a result. So he is a muckraker. He is trying to expose Standard Oil for this monopoly that they are when they try to say they're not. Oh. Okay, Jacob Riis. Jacob Riis is on my test. You have to know about Jacob Riis, how the other half lives. He showed slum conditions in New York City factories and housing. Almost every single one of the photos that we have are generally from Jacob Riis. When you see little kids curled up and huddled in like above a storm grate trying to live, all of those men that live in that one room house, all of the cop in the terrible looking house, almost all of that is Jacob Riis in the late 1890s and early 1900. And he's a photographer, a photojournalist. All of these pictures, Jacob Riis. How the Other Half Lives. These are all famous photographs. There they are. That's a famous one of the little kids just trying to find a place to sleep, all huddled together. FYI, this is a man. This guy has a mustache. This is a man. He's wearing a leather apron. He's wearing an apron to protect himself. If you look at his hands, you can tell. That's actually a guy. And this is what we talked about people all just trying to find a place to sleep when they aren't working 12 or 14 hours a day. Again, if you could smell that picture, I can't even think. Just dilapidated, beat up old buildings, and people lived in them. Okay, Lincoln Steffens wrote articles, The Shame of the Cities, revealing the corrupt alliance between business and government. Steffens. The Shame of the Cities. Some of you talked about this the other day. Ida Tarbell, she writes about the Standard Oil Company and how devastating. She devastates the Standard Oil Company in this expose about all the terrible ways that they have cooperated with the government to the dismay of the poor people. Ida Tarbell is Standard Oil. Ida B. Wells is anti-lynching and the NAACP. Ida Tarbell is Standard Oil. She's a white woman. Ida B. Wells is a black woman who stands up. She creates the National Association for Colored Women, and she's part of the National Association for Colored People, the NAACP. She helps to create that, and she's anti-lynching. This is Ida Tarbell, and she writes about Standard Oil. Before we forget, I just want to go real fast through the progressive era. So the presidents are 25 through 33. The 20th century starts off with McKinley. He's assassinated in 1901, and Teddy Roosevelt takes over. So we have Teddy Taft Wilson. They are the progressive presidents. McKinley was the Spanish-American War, and he's a Republican. Teddy Taft Wilson are the progressive presidents. Teddy and Taft are actually Republicans, and Wilson is a Democrat, but they are all progressives. And then Wilson is World War I. Then you have Harding, Coolidge, Hoover. That's the Roaring '20s. And there's not a war during that time, and they are all Republicans, pro-business. And then we have FDR with the New Deal and Truman, and both FDR and Truman are World War II. Truman drops the atom bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, so they are both World War II. So don't forget about that, 25 through 33, McKinley, Teddy Taft Wilson, Harding, Coolidge, Hoover, FDR, and Truman. David Phillips argued that 75 out of 90 U.S. senators represented businesses, not the people. It's very similar today. Very similar today. So many lobbyists, so many people putting money in the pockets in the re-election campaigns of people that are running for Congress, the House of Representatives, state senate, mayors, governors. There's so much money in politics today, it's very similar to the Gilded Age. That they're just corrupt, they're just being bought. Both sides, Democrat and Republican. Following the color line dealt with the intentionality of black illiteracy. Intentionality means that we are intending on making sure that black people do not get an education, because education equals power. Knowledge is power. So we intentionally try to make sure that they stay illiterate. John Spargo's The Bitter Cry of the Children exposed child labor, just like you would think. Still in the 1900s, 1910, we still have child labor. There's still children going to work, little children. I think they finally cut the age off at 12 or 14 or something like that, that you're not allowed to work, but it's still 14 or something. And 12-year-olds would say, oh, hi, I'm 14. Terrible. Children. You can't even see them. They're in the picture. There's more children. They are in the coal dust. They're sorting coal. No shoes. Poor. Look at all of these people, all of these little kids, and they're all wearing working clothes. They're all wearing little working clothes. They have to go to work. Unbelievable. Covered in coal mine dust, covered in coal dust. A lot of little kids and smaller kids worked in the coal mines because they could get into the little tiny spaces. And I think I already told you about the canary in the coal mine, that it has little canary lungs. So if a canary tipped over dead, then everybody knew, get out. There's no air in here. We're losing our air. Thomas Lawson attacked the railroad barons. like Vanderbilt, and by that time we already had J.P. Morgan was a railroad baron. He also was Carnegie Steel. I guess Morgan's not. He's Steel. He's Steel. Stanford for sure. The muckrakers believed the cure to the ills of American democracy was more democracy, to be more democratic, like not authoritarian. Teddy? Political progressivism. Political progressivism, Teddy, Taft, and Wilson. Progressives sought to make America's democracy more democratic, and after having first infiltrated and influenced local and state governments, eventually began making gains at the federal level, in other words, presidents, congressmen. Progressives were mostly middle class. They're not poor, just trying to survive. Squeezed between trusts above and immigrants below. Trusts are the monopolies. Progressives sought greater political weapons. The initiative meant voters directly proposed legislation, so these are weapons of the progressive era. Voters could propose legislation. We still have an initiative. It's on a ballot, and you are trying to get something passed. Marijuana legalized in a state would be an initiative, something proposed by people, not by the Senate. A referendum means people vote on laws that affect them. And a recall means to take back bad officials from their positions. So after somebody's been elected mayor or governor or something and they're doing a terrible job or they broke laws, then you might have a recall so that they could be removed from their position. Progressives wanted to use secret ballots to undermine party bosses and to directly elect senators to curb corruption. So secret ballots. Before that, there weren't secret ballots, so people could see who you were voting for, and often the ballots were different colors, so they could see if you took a red ballot or a blue ballot. It wasn't really red and blue, but they knew who you voted for, so when you left, people could intimidate you so that the next time, being like, don't you dare, like as you're walking in, don't you dare take the wrong ballot, like they would intimidate you. And then also direct election of senators instead of being elected from the State House. 17th Amendment, direct election of senators. And there are secret ballots now. 1913, the 17th Amendment provided for the direct election of senators by the people. 17th Amendment was intended to awaken in the senators a more acute sense of responsibility to the people. Now we're voting for you. Election through state legislature made the Senate a sort of aristocratic body. The state senates voting for the senator meant all of the rich people that got to be senators in the first place would be making those votes. Too far removed from the people, beyond their reach, and with no special interest in their welfare. When the Senate body proposed who was going to go to the National Senate, then it didn't have enough of an impact on the people. So the 17th Amendment is that we, the people, elect senators now. Progressive cities run by experts, the city manager system, hoping to take politics out of municipal administration instead of mayors running cities. And then also same thing, like you all remember Boss Tweed in Tammany Hall in New York City, that he was corrupt and took kickbacks and kickbacks and kickbacks, even though he was an elected official. I'm talking about my cousin Robin Hayes, who is a city manager in Mount Dora, Florida, which is fun because it's an old white men's club, most of the city managers. And she is the city manager because that is what her expertise is in running cities economically, financially, especially the power of the purse. She makes sure that she says what money can go for what things, and then it takes away the corruption of elected officials doing that. Way to go, Robin. Urban reformers tackled slumlords, juvenile delinquents, and prostitution. So they are trying to get rid of social ills that they feel are horrible for human beings. Slumlords could have terrible housing and still get paid for it, and nobody would make them fix it. It's awful. Okay, state governments like Robert La Follette sought progressive reforms. You just have to know that La Follette in Wisconsin was a progressive, and that was in the state Senate. That's state governors, La Follette in Wisconsin. I determined that the power of this corrupt influence should be broken. La Follette. Progressives sought to reduce child labor. Remember that they could get paid as little as like a dime a day compared to a grown man who make like $1. The Triangle Shirtwaist Company in New York City was responsible for the 146 workers' deaths, forcing cities to adopt strict building codes. So women were on the 7th and 8th floor, if I remember correctly, and they were locked in. They locked the doors so that women couldn't leave. And then a fire caught because it's garment workers, it's textiles. Textiles everywhere. Cloth, 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 cloth. And then somehow a fire started and the doors had been locked from the outside so that the women couldn't leave, so that they couldn't leave while they were working. But then when the fire happened, nobody could get out. And a lot of the women died by the doors of the fire, but many jumped to their deaths. They jumped out the windows because it's either burn alive or jump out and try to survive. And so a lot of people are dead on the pavement that jumped out. And they locked the doors, they locked them in. This comes with changes, of course. Fire codes, fire safety, nobody's allowed to be locked in. You have to have sprinklers in businesses and schools. We have them. The doors have been locked by the factory owners. And so there was all of these women that were piled up by the door that had died, trying to get out, trying to get that door open. All for money, money, money. There's pictures of women that have jumped out of the building that are dead on the street. That is sad. Shorter work hours, 8-hour days. The Supreme Court upheld laws restricting the workday to 10 hours. That's 1917. In 1917, they're still like, okay, so we'll just make it 10 hours. 10 hours. Later, of course, it becomes 8. The temperance movement, you have to know temperance means no more drinking. So this is the predecessor to prohibition. The women's temperance movement, church, 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 rural, William Jennings Bryan, that kind of thing. They are like anti-city. They don't like cities where all of that bad stuff is happening and people drinking and things. So temperance movement is the beginning of prohibition. The 18th Amendment prohibited the sale and drinking of alcohol. And in 1933, the 21st Amendment was repealed. By the way, that's FDR that has it repealed, and they want the tax money because a lot of people are still drinking anyway, but there's no taxes now. And a lot of gangs started. You guys have seen them, like mafia-type gangs, the movies with the Gatling guns and stuff like that, and gangsters killing each other, Bonnie and Clyde, that kind of stuff. Progressives also supported the temperance movement and prohibition. They thought there should be no alcohol. Oh, I like her. Carrie Nation famously goes into bar rooms and busts up the bar rooms with an axe. I'm a bulldog running along at the feet of Jesus, barking at what he doesn't like, and he doesn't like drinking. So she goes into all these bars. She calls all of the media. She makes all the newspapers come, and they take pictures of her, and she uses an axe, and she busts up all of the bar rooms. Carrie Nation, prohibitionist. Okay, the emergence of Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt. Progressive policies. The most famous of the progressive presidents, Teddy Roosevelt. Progressives is over here versus the Gilded Age presidents who are over there that supported businesses. Roosevelt's emergence as a national figure during the Spanish-American War, his subsequent popularity but unwillingness to work with political machines forced Republicans to make him vice president, a graveyard for men with presidential aspirations. They hid him in the vice presidency. It's a graveyard for anyone with presidential aspirations. Here, go pet puppies. Here, go do a ribbon cutting somewhere. They do nothing. It's not a very significant position in the grand scheme of things. Nobody knows where Mike Pence is, right? It's not a big position. The president is what people care about. So they thought they were hiding him as vice president, and then when McKinley gets assassinated, Teddy is now the president. Oh, so McKinley ran for re-election in 1900 and he's killed in 1901. Republicans wanted to get rid of the popular maverick Teddy. They're trying to hide him. So they made him the VP, a political graveyard, a wasteland. Nobody would see him there. Nobody would hear from him. He'd be gone. We've had 58 vice presidents in U.S. history, of which only 5 have actually become the president. Biden is trying to be that. Biden was a vice president. He's trying to be another one that would become a president. It's not very likely, according to history. Please don't let that be true. There they are. People that were vice presidents that became president. Only 2 in the 20th century. William Jennings Bryan, populism, populism, populism. Farmers, farmers, farmers. He really wanted to be the president. 1896 was the closest he came against McKinley. Okay, you have to know that William Jennings Bryan is against imperialism. This is theoretically him. Bryan focused on the evils of imperialism, a debate Americans were sick of. They didn't want to hear it. A lot more Americans were imperialistic than anti-imperialist. Against American imperialism, that means us going to other countries and taking over and raping, robbing, and pillaging them of their natural resources and harming their people. He's anti-imperialist. Republicans argued that Bryanism would sap U.S. prosperity. McKinley was easily reelected. McKinley was shot and killed 6 months into his second term. Leon Czolgosz. He was a socialist or an anarchist. I killed the president because he was the enemy of the good people, the good working people. I am not sorry for my crime. Again, working people exist here, laborers exist here, and McKinley was like the Gilded Age presidents. He was pro-business. Took office at 42. Okay. While boxing in the White House with heavyweight champion John O'Sullivan, Teddy received a blow to his face that left him blind in his left eye. I don't know. Hero of San Juan Hill, and he was the Bull Moose. He's going to start the Bull Moose Party in the future. Teddy. Teddy Roosevelt became the youngest president at 42. He promised to carry out McKinley's policies. He doesn't really. Except the imperialist part. That damn cowboy is president now. Mark Hanna was a famous Republican heavyweight that was trying to put people in office, and he hated Teddy Roosevelt, and now Teddy Roosevelt is the president. Teddy was a big-chested man with a short temper and big glasses who was famously stubborn. He was high energy. He was from a wealthy New York family and graduated from Harvard. That's interesting. He's from a wealthy family. However, he's fighting for laborers and the working poor. As a child, he watched Abraham Lincoln's funeral parade from a window in New York. He saw Abraham Lincoln's funeral parade. There they are. Not Rushmore. Okay, Teddy's famous motto, speak softly and carry a big stick. Teddy's famous motto, speak softly and carry a big stick. It's Teddy's famous motto, speak softly and carry a big stick. Apparently you have to know that. The big stick. Teddy became a master politician who would not be controlled by political machines. Think Tammany Hall, think Boss Tweed, people like that. He believed the president should lead the country, not just represent a party. He's considered the first modern president. 20th century starts off with McKinley, but he is still more like a Gilded Age president. Behind the actual government sits enthroned an invisible government owing no allegiance and acknowledging no responsibility to the people. He wants the people to have a say in government. He's the first one that cares about that. The Gilded Age people, the Gilded Age presidents, and McKinley do not care what the people think, only what big business think. It's called the square deal. The square deal for labor, for laborers. Remember, back here in the Gilded Age when we had laborers, we had the police or troops sent to break up labor protests. Teddy Roosevelt brought progressive reform to the White House in the form of the square deal. Teddy Roosevelt equals the square deal. Seeking to control, 3 C's. It's called the 3 C's. To control corporations, to protect consumers, and to conserve the nation's resources and natural beauty. Back here on my wall is a picture of John Muir and Teddy Roosevelt because he creates many, many, many national parks and preserves. So that's protecting the environment. Conservationism. That's what conservationism is protecting the environment. He does that by making lots and lots and lots of preserves, wildlife habitats, national parks. The other 2 things is he controls the corporations. In other words, he doesn't side with the corporations like the Gilded Age presidents and McKinley did. He's trying to control corporations, to reel them in. He's a trust buster. He's making them not be so powerful. He's making the government be more powerful again. In the 19th century, the late 19th century after Civil War, the government was not powerful. I went the wrong way. And then protect the consumer. Protect the consumer, consumer protections, we're going to talk about it. About the Upton Sinclair's The Jungle and how horrible the meat packing industry is. And they create the Meat Inspection Act and the FDA and the Food and Drug Act and the Food and Drug Administration, which still exists today. So the square deal equals protect the consumer, conservation, control corporations. 3 C's, the square deal. Teddy was the first of the progressive presidents. Teddy, Taft, Wilson. Taft is the largest president, like physically largest. Square deal. He always is seen with a cowboy hat on. Famously seen with a cowboy hat. So is Reagan and so is George W. Bush. Square deal was Teddy's domestic agenda. 3 C's. Control corporations, consumer protections, conservation of natural resources. In 1902, a strike took place in the anthracite coal mine of Pennsylvania. 140,000 workers wanted 20% raises and only a 9-hour workday. The mine owners refused to negotiate, and coal shortages became an issue across the country because of this anthracite coal. Remember, it's all West Virginia, basically. Because of this coal strike, then it's put a lock on coal. There's no coal going anywhere, and we need coal to power trains, coal to power factories. It was huge, huge deal. So Teddy threatened to seize and operate the mines with troops. Workers got 10% raises in a 9-hour day. Teddy helped the workers. That's not what's happened any time before this. All the presidents helped the businesses. In 1903, the Department of Commerce and Labor was formed to address labor and management issues. They've actually made a department to help laborers, a department in the federal government to help protect the laborers. That's unheard of. A Bureau of Corporations was created to investigate businesses with interstate commerce. It was highly useful in trust busting. They made something to control corporations. Nobody controlled corporations in the Gilded Age, just Teddy. Teddy in the 20th century. The second C, control corporations. Teddy's willingness to regulate bad trusts, corporations performing essential functions but that harmed consumers, marked a clear break from his Gilded Age predecessors. This is why he's called a trust buster, because of this, but he decides. Like it says bad trusts. Guess who decided if they were a bad trust or a good trust? Teddy decided. Taft busted more trusts faster, but Teddy's still known as the trust buster. And he decides whether it was a good trust or a bad trust. So some trusts were allowed to stay because he decided they were a good trust. The Interstate Commerce Commission, created in 1887, was inadequate and unenforced. Remember, that was on the trains, and nobody enforced it. They did whatever they wanted still. Laissez-faire economics. They still did what they wanted. He decided what were bad trusts. Teddy thought there were good trusts and bad trusts, so he controlled the good ones and killed the bad ones. And then some of you know about the teddy bear, that he famously was out being a hunter, and so somebody brought him a bear on a rope, and it was just a cub, and they were like, here, shoot this one. They're like, no, I'm not going to shoot a bear on a rope, especially a baby cub. So he wouldn't shoot the bear, and so now famously there are teddy bears. So little kids all had teddy bears because he wouldn't shoot the little bear cub. That's why we have teddy bears. Okay, trusts. Trust busting made Wall Street furious, but it made Teddy very popular with everybody except Wall Street, except big business. Teddy cracked down on 40 trusts, dissolved the beef, sugar, fertilizer, and harvester trust, the ones he considered bad trusts. Teddy took down some trusts, hoping to force other trusts to reform themselves. He was hoping that when they saw what he was doing, that they would like, okay, cut it out, we'll be good, don't bust us. Caring for the consumer. Okay, I'll stop right there. Have a good day, have a good weekend.